Hello, everybody. You're tuned into Foundry Live online. Foundry Live is a term-based event for creative students where we bring industry professionals together to discuss what's happening in the industry. And obviously, we can't do that, so we've decided to go to the professionals instead. Before I introduce the guest, please send through any questions you might have. We'll either answer them straight away or we'll get back to them when we pause for a breath. Tonight, I've got the pleasure of talking to Dr. Vanessa Ward. Vanessa is a designer, strategist, teacher, creative thinker. She's a founder of Nomadism, along with Sandy, and that started nearly 5 years ago. When I was looking it up today, it's 4 years and 11 months. Is that right? Around about that?
Yeah, so, it's slipped by. It's been a busy 4 years. So yeah.
Yeah, so nearly 5th birthday, which is very exciting. Many of you watching this will know Vanessa because she's also a teacher at Foundry, one of our long-term teachers, normally in the kind of design thinking area, the product design, all those kind of areas. And this isn't your first time on Foundry Live, is it?
No, I'm a repeat guest, repeat offender.
I mean, it was a very different format last time because you were on a stage and you actually had an audience around you. I have to think, like, when is that going to happen again?
I know. I mean, I think Australia's done incredibly well, and so it seems like it's just within reach. And we're just about to get back to normal life if we can manage our borders. So fingers crossed we can return, because there's nothing like the sort of dynamic in a room and versus sitting in our respective houses.
Yeah, it's really we do a music festival up here, and we cancelled on the day that we went into lockdown, basically. And so, but unfortunately, like, the organizer was offered all the tickets back, but like everyone was so lovely and they all said, no, we'll keep it for next time, which was really lovely. But at the same time, it created a whole other problem that the next one he runs, he's like already down 1,500 tickets because they've already been sold and the money's already been used. And so it's that kind of like really scary thing about, like, it has to be a huge event next time to like kind of make money. Right. So let's talk about you. Your career has spanned across loads of different countries: Scotland, Canada, America, Singapore, just to name a few. How did you end up in Tasmania?
It started when I was working in Singapore. I was working for Procter & Gamble there, and mum and dad, who I grew up in Perth, and mum and dad were in Western Australia, and they were looking to move, and they said, we're not sure about Tasmania, do you want to recce it for us? And so Sandy and I came down here and we just fell in love with it. It was it was so different. And part of it was we were both trapped in incredibly intense corporate jobs. And so it was kind of like this little dream of complete other, which we just kind of kept sort of idealizing and sort of fantasizing about, thinking, oh, well, we'll just go down there for holidays. And then after things happened, we ended up in San Francisco. And then after a certain period, when it came time to renew my visa, I was thinking, I just feel like, every time we came here, we just had such a lovely time. We thought, why don't we have this quality of life permanently, And I think that was the way we made our switch. And so we moved, and we didn't know anyone. We didn't really have any clear plans. We started looking for land. And I think I called you up within like a week or so, yep. And suddenly I was working at Foundry. But it happened really fast, and it's happened really easily. So it's been a tremendous move. Like it's really it's a very welcoming community, and there's a ton of opportunity here. So it's nice to be in a place where you can have sort of quite immediate impact as well.
It does always feel like, I mean, obviously I live in New South Wales, but every time I get the chance to go to Tassie, the opportunities just seem like everyone seems like they're a can-do sort of person, and everything's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to like in reference to design here as well, it's a growing scene, but it's certainly an awareness that's creeping up, especially with small businesses and food producers, and farmers and all sorts of people. There's this kind of growing awareness and a sense that they need to engage with it. So it's a nice time to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. just jumping on that, I mean, you mentioned about the community, and obviously San Francisco and Glasgow have amazing design communities.
Mhm.
Is there stuff that I guess you saw in those different design communities that could be taken on in Hobart to kind of help grow? I mean, Hobart's got an amazing community already, if a little bit sort of small, I guess. Is there anything that, any
Yeah,
tips?
yeah. I mean, I think so. Like Glasgow's Yeah, Glasgow is really interesting in the sense that it's in some ways really similar to Hobart. And I know that sounds really bizarre, but there's a real kind of maker attitude there. There's a real sense of I'm
Right.
just going to start doing this in my garage, and that is
Love it.
really, you know, Glaswegians are salt of the earth, and you know, there's it's pretty much the same down here. And so there's just this real sense of let's try it, let's get on with it. We don't have to wait for you know, the right equipment. We don't have to wait for permission. We don't have to wait for all of these things. We just try it, and that's really great. You know, everyone is 2 degrees effectively away from anyone else, and so if you want to find someone who's in their particular field, top of their game, or even, you know, doing something very specific, you only have to ask 5 people, and you've probably found someone who knows someone else, right? Like that's an absolute strength. You know, like that's remarkable. And so, yeah, there's let's just reach out and connect and have a conversation and just move things forward. So that sort of you know, feet on the ground, just doing things is really great. I guess I'd love to. I mean, I think the thing about San Francisco, which is you know, absolutely its kind of charm and its absolute strength, is this idea of problem solving. So you only have to have a conversation with, you know, people who you live with in an apartment, and they're all too willing to go, oh, let's solve this problem. Like whatever it is, everyone's in that sort of problem solving mode. It's like, right, what can we do? And that is refreshing. You know, people are just so proactive to like just jump on it and try, and, you know, they have this idea that they can, you know, change the world with everything they do, and that is amazing, sometimes exhausting. And sometimes, you know, in you know, true American terms, a bit sort of bombastic and all the rest of it, but it comes from a place of sort of genuine desire, and that's the real gold there. It's kind of like, how can I make these things better? You know, it's not just about, you know, where's the idea of making money. That's in there as well, but there's a larger kind of bigger set of values at work as well. And so I think, you know, they're both things that would really resonate here, and definitely we could use more of.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It sounds like it's a perfect fit for you, because every time we've talked, one of the things I really love about your design sense, and I guess your design philosophy, is this idea of building, and I guess getting your hands dirty and wanting to be involved in every part of the process. And, you know, for instance, like the house you're in is something that you've built kind of from the ground up and designed. Can you tell us more about that? Because as far as I understand it, it's like this ongoing project, I guess, which looks at, like, you know, how to get off the grid and be completely sustainable in everything you do. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my perspective of design is that it really it's kind of approach to everything that you do, right? So if you're going to build a house, you find ways to design. And even though I'm not an architect, although I have studied some architecture, it's really this, like, how can I think about this differently? How can I think about how I live, how I want to live? How could we live better? You know, and I think thinking through the various levels of from a sort of personal standpoint to, you know, what mark can I make on it as well, it all kind of comes together. So yeah, we live in a house it's lovely. We've spent a lot of time thinking about and speaking to people, and knowing that it's really a sort of an art, not a science, and trying to make something really solar passive. You know, trying to make it so that it's as energy efficient as possible, without sort of compromising on you know, tech and you know, comfort and all of these sorts of things. So it's great. We, you know, I think we've been here 3 years now. We've been living here 3 years, just over, and we have a, you know, fabulous garden which produces most of our food. And you know, with our networks here, we're able to buy straight from farms, and so that's, I mean, going back to community. You can really structure your life in a way here that facilitates all of this with the people and with the networks. And so, yeah, we've just been incredibly fortunate that we were able to sort of pull all of that together. I mean, I know you live on a property as well, so it's a huge ongoing effort. You know, there's not a single hour where you're not thinking, oh, I've got all of these problems to solve. Like, at the moment, our big problem is we have quolls living under our house, you know, and so
oh wow,
there's just this constant shifting of qualls. So it's like, so every there's something, right? And I do think it comes back to design, because you're like, how can I fix this in a way that that's better for ongoing, you know, life? And so I think it's perfect. It keeps me, you know, positively engaged.
Yeah.
I have a nickname of having itchy fingers and having to do things all the time. So, you know, this type of situation is great. It's kind of like, right, there's never a shortage.
Yeah. And this is, I guess I sometimes, because I'm exactly the same, like I feel like design can be applied to everything from raising children to veggie gardens to, you know, anything. And sometimes I get accused of like thinking that design can solve everything or save the world, but I really feel that, like, I really feel it could. How do you feel about that sort of stuff?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we're on the same page here. But I think it's an approach, right? It's an approach of, you know, what's going wrong here? What resources do I have to fix it? Because, you know, we don't all have all the resources to do everything. We need to work with what we have. And those constraints are entirely within the realm of, you know, you could translate that to a design brief. You know, those constraints that you have in terms of materials, money, time, all of these things become your constraints. And that's your design brief, you know, so you can really look at everything and go, how can I make this better? How can I solve this? And that is the approach I take to everything, you know. So it keeps me entertained anyway. I'm not sure about everyone else. But
one thing that I seem to remember you telling me about, you were doing something with wool, a wool project. What was that?
Yeah. So this is the story. When we moved to our 5 acres, we were like, wow, this is a lot of grass to cut.
Oh no, we've lost.
There we go. It's all right.
Oh,
am I back? Yeah. And so a friend said, oh, look, why don't you get sheep? And so we said, okay, sure. And so we ended up with these beautiful lambs, and, you know, we spoiled them rotten. And then we put them out to pasture, and they kept our grass down, which was great, problem solved. And every year we got another couple. And then we started accumulating all of this wool. And so I started having all this wool, and I'm like, what do I do with it? And then I was like, I need to find some way to clean it. And in the process of this, I discovered, and speaking to friends and reaching out to contacts, and this is that Tasmania story where I was able to speak to, you know, growers. I was able to speak to a wool agent. I was able to speak to people who sell for distribution in Europe. Like, I went through the entire supply chain going, I'm looking for a way to get this wool commercially cleaned. And so it turns out that Tasmania lost all of its wool cleaning or wool scouring manufacturing capabilities, and in fact Australia has lost most of them as well. And so when we grow wool here, and Tasmania produces something in the order of 40 to 50% of like the total merino clip for Australia, like we produce a huge amount of wool, it goes across to China or across to Europe to get cleaned, and then it might come back here to be dyed, spun, etc., etc. So
that's mental.
It's crazy, and it's like the story is kind of far worse than that. Like, goes back to the 60s, where Australia had a sort of fixed price for its wool. And it was just a colossal governmental disaster, but it meant that the bottom just crashed out of the wool market. And in the meantime, so Australia was doing incredibly well, producing wool, and then they put this false floor on, and they couldn't sell their wool competitively. And it meant that polyester and nylon sort of moved in as competitive alternatives to wool. And so when we were able to sell again at a competitive, we lost all competitive advantage. And so the price of wool is now for a non-merino, so a crossbred wool, is down to 20 cents a kilo. which is incredibly
Right,
low.
wow.
So it used to be
Wow.
it used to be $20 a kilo. It's fallen incredibly, and so it's now cheaper for people to throw their wool away than it is to store it and sell it, and move it along because of the time involved and logistics and everything else. So it led me down the garden path of looking at what can I do with wool. And so on a personal level, I'm looking at, I only have 5 or 6 sheep. So I'm looking at what is the greatest value add I can put into the wool in terms of design, artistry, you name it, what can I do with it? But I've also got friends now who are sheep farmers, and they have, tons and tons and tons of wool. And I'm looking at wool from a standpoint of what else can we do with it, which is incredibly low production value, but uses vast amounts of wool. So completely opposite ends of the spectrum, but really trying to understand what are the design opportunities here for doing some value add at different ends of the spectrum to move wool. And so, that's been going on in the last, it's an insane story. And it's been going on for the last, I would say, year or so. I've been sort of, pulling on this thread and seeing where it goes.
Great analogy.
And pulling on the yarn, and and so it's still in progress. But I've discovered a lot of things, and trying to find the opportunities, not of course just for myself, but for others as well, and see how can we shift away from this selling wool as a commodity which has no value to something where it does. Yeah. And so, that's a kind of side project that sort of ebbs flows between everything else.
I love it. I love one simple question leads you down the garden path, as you said, with no end in sight.
I know, but it's a really I think it's a really important problem for Tasmania. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where
Absolutely.
We have this huge resource here. It's massively underutilized, and design has the capabilities to try and understand what opportunities are. And so it's a really lovely space to be in, to be working and discovering and meeting people, and
But we're getting close to the end. So one of the things I really wanted to ask you about was with Nomadism. Obviously, you work with quite a few clients who are overseas or on the mainland and that sort of stuff. How does that all work remotely? And I guess I'm coming at it from this point of, a lot of people talk about being worldwide is wonderful because you get more clients and you've got like more opportunity to have a bigger audience. But the reality of chasing clients and working in foreign currencies and time zones and all that kind of stuff, I guess I'd love to hear like what it's really like.
Well, we were lucky in the sense that we set up Nomadism actually in Singapore before we left. So when I left for the project in San Francisco, we moved. We moved here, but we were floating around because we were a bit homeless, really. And it's so easy to set up a company in Singapore. Like, it literally takes 5 minutes versus anywhere else in the world.
Right.
And we had a lot of natural networks there because we'd lived and worked there previously. So our first major clients were all in Singapore. And so we actually set the company up there. We've since then obviously moved here and set it up there and set it up here as well. But we've retained our networks and clients in Singapore. And so it's pretty easy and pretty for us. And I think we've hit that point, especially after COVID, where everyone is super comfortable with working online. So there's a real sort of comfort with, actually most of our business communication happens on WhatsApp, and I know this is insane and crazy, and I've seen it before, but we're logged into 15 chats at once, and there's various things working with different people, and so it's pretty fluid. We're a few hours ahead, and so we kind of catch the tail end of what's happened the day before. We try and deliver first thing in the morning before their day starts, and that's kind of how it works. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it totally does. It completely does. It's just always interested. I mean, obviously, the dream is always to work with like multiple clients all around the world, but it's often not as the fairy tale that everyone kind of assumes it might be.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are definitely administration challenges. I was doing some work for an agency in the US, and you know, like to move their systems as a foreigner again was really, really troublesome. So and it can, obviously things can only, you can only work with teams when you can work independently. So as soon as you need to work very, very collaboratively, the time zones really
become a real problem.
Here. Yeah, but that aside, we found it, you know, I did think, oh, maybe we should actually go for this particular project to Singapore that we've got on at the moment, because it's a big one. And then I actually thought, no, let's just stay here. It's so much better to be able to work at a distance and have that distance as well. So that's kind of a big thing at the moment, but keeping us going.
That's wonderful. We've come to time. And so the way I like to finish off is normally with 5 quick questions. So I'm going to change it up this week. So I'm going to give you either or all questions. So you've got to answer one or the other. So snakes or sharks?
Oh, I've lost you on the second word there. Snakes or
sharks?
Oh, snakes.
Oh, really? Sure. Why?
Yeah, because we've got a friend down the road who's a snake catcher, and so I just
I love it.
But I don't know anyone who's a shark catcher.
Shark catcher, yeah, fair enough. Asking questions or answering questions?
I would want to say asking questions, because that is it's actually a place of control. but I think sometimes it's much easier to answer questions. But yeah, I think that's the trade-off.
Books or movies?
Oh, books, definitely. We don't have a TV and we don't have streaming services, and but we do have really active Libby subscriptions. So
great. Okay, you have to choose one of these: heavy metal or gangster rap.
Oh, gangster rap any day.
And I think I might know the answer to this one: morning or late night?
Oh, definitely morning. You probably knew that. We kind of rise with the sun, and in about 20 minutes, it'll be my bedtime. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to us. It's been really, really fun as always.
Thank you, Matt. Been always a pleasure talking to you. It's a pity we don't see more of you down here.
I know. Well, I'm always on the phone, so you can always just grab me. But thanks everyone who tuned in, and thanks for people who sent through questions. And thank you very much, Vanessa.
Thanks, Matt.